For this, and I've only just started. She's in charge of the contaminated land, or I think aims to be in charge of the contaminated land, or perhaps to eliminate it. But took us on a fantastic tour all over around that part of King's Lynn, and really trained us in what to look for and how. But she's also very involved in the LGBTQ community, and I'm going to hand over to her to run this last session.
Thanks, Veronica. So this session is about entanglements and queer perspectives, and the interaction between nature, culture and the environment. And Helen and Matt, who will talk in a moment, can discuss that from the point of view of artists. But I'm here, I'm an environmental scientist and a union activist as well. And I was interested in what Tim said right at the start about us being verbs and that we are what we do. We also are who we are, I think. And in my union role, I often have to speak up and represent people who, because of where they were born or how they're wired inside, aren't always able to do that when they need to. So as I say, I'm an environmental scientist, started as a geologist and then went into geographic information systems and remote sensing, and now specialise in contaminated land. So that describes my work life. I moved here about 20 years ago, and it's also really important to me to be part of the community in West Norfolk, which I now call home. And I feel that locally it's where our actions often have the most impact. So my union work isn't just about people's rights at work, but it's also about how they can access the things that make our lives more complete, including nature and the huge benefits that a connection with the natural world brings to us. And unions have been fundamental in working people's education and learning and their relationship with culture. It helps us understand why, if we work together and we stand together for equality and social justice, we can start to solve some of our problems, and particularly the current earth crisis needs all of those solutions to happen together. So at work, I do have to work across disciplines. As I said, I specialise in contaminated land, but the risks that it poses are interdisciplinary, intersectional and fluid. And to me, fluid isn't just about water. It doesn't just describe that. It's also about systems, processes and people. And part of my research before doing this session, I went to the Peterborough Radical Book Fair, which is the most amazing event that I think everybody should try to get to. A little island of hope and calm and safety next to a roundabout off a bypass in Peterborough with loads of England flags nearby. So, and while I was there, I picked up some wonderful leaflets. I said, if I was coming to an arts event and I was talking about queering art, what would people like to read? And I picked up some fab pamphlets and zines, and I've also brought along Dope magazine, which I don't know if you know about, which is a great way of artists sharing work and people sharing political writing as well, and also funding giving homeless people a way to make a living too. So they can come over to the gallery, do take one, do subscribe. So our artists. Oh. So Helen, I wanted to look up Helen's work and just see where it fits into this theme. And some of the words that are described, that describe Helen's work, is that it explores class, gender, sexuality, ecology, activism, and interrogating archives and themes of rebellion. All of these things obviously appeal to me, and I'm really interested to hear how she describes our interaction with the natural world and the stories that we tell ourselves and others about this. And then I was really excited to meet Matt on the recent residency and to ask questions about his work that's called glitch ecology and what glitches might be. I always think of it in the context of the Matrix as a wonderfully futuristic thing, but the definition is more about these little problems that interrupt a process and you end up with a different result, which is actually quite a fascinating subject. And Matt also introduced me to the book The Queer Art of Failure, which I must admit I've not read in detail, but I whizzed through in preparation for this. And in there, it's also discussed about low culture as well, on this theme of culture. And I can remember early in my career, I was chatting to a civil servant who I think was trying to compliment me, and said how good it was to see more women leading in the soft sciences. And, and I just think, so, you know, I would like to stand together with these artists here, you know, whether we're producing high culture, low culture, and soft science or hard science. And before I introduce the artists, I'd just like to finish with a little quote, which again, I don't know who to attribute it to, because it was on, before I say that, when you work in local government, you get obsessed with pin badges, with messages, because you can secretly get messages across. And so I picked up this wonderful pin badge that just says the future is fluid, which I thought was a fitting theme for today. And I also picked up a sticker, and I don't know who this quote is attributed to, but I think it's a good thought for today. The future is already here. It's just not equally distributed. So I'll pass over to Helen first.
Where does it say play from start?
Is it up or down? Or?
It's
That one, okay, yeah. Oh, hi everybody. Thanks for staying till the end. There's been that many speakers on today that my head is buzzing, absolutely buzzing. So this may not go to plan, because I want to comment on almost everybody that's spoken. I'll just tell you my relationship with King's Lynn. I applied for a residency last year and did it last year in summer, and then exhibited this year. And I would like to say thanks very much to Veronica. You have kind of changed my life, and I've got this relationship with King's Lynn now, which I never thought that I would. So I'm from Liverpool, and there is a direct train from Liverpool to here, so it really helps as well. So I came into the residency as someone making films around ecology. So I made a film about sycamore tree. Before the films that I made, one was called Silent Spring, which was a nod to Rachel Carson, and the film that was in the exhibition was called Salt Marsh, which was talks about the fens and the salt marshes here. But Sycamore was basically about unaligned or marginalised people and species. So that's kind of like where my interest lies, is in that marginality. And I'm going to try to explain a little bit about what queer ecology might mean. So There are some, I kind of just want to talk around some of these slides really, but the origins of queer ecology kind of come from an ecofeminist point of view or academic background, and some of the kind of ideas is about challenging heteronormative concepts, and challenging binary ideas around nature of there only being male or female, or good or bad, or light or dark. So I'm particularly interested in the eco-tones of those edges as well. The origins of queer ecology is one that encourages embracing diversity as well, and inclusion of both the human and the non-human worlds. So how to talk about that, how to make films about that is kind of part of being an artist, if you like. I've got a couple of quotes here. One is from Jack Halberstam, which I think Matt's going to talk about as well. But a queer ecology practice demands that we see ourselves in community with other species instead of above them. There's been that many people talking about that today that I won't talk about that. Some of the pioneers of queer ecology is Catriona Morseland's Sanderland, Stacey Alimo and Greta Gard, if anybody needs to follow that up and look at the work there. And I think I've missed somebody else, I think there. So I got interested in kind of like wanting to make a film about sycamores, and then how do I do that as part of my master's degree? And then I came across this body of work, which is an academic canon. I didn't realise there was a queer ecology until quite recently, and that people are writing, or have been writing for a few decades now, from an environmentalist sort of heritage, if you like. So I've done a lot of reading and some writing around that. I've got a quote from Jack Halberstam, who is a part of the trans LGBT community, who writes, "Wilderness offers within it and has the potential to unmake, unwrite and unthink the script." So looking at nature from a queer point of view, as somebody who defines or identifies as gender non-conforming, I'm looking at the same landscape, some people in the room differently, if you like, and what's my place in that, what's my positionality within that. I'll just come off script as well. So when I came to King's Lynn, I had this really great idea that I was going to go to the sea, and I was going to follow Rachel Carson. I've got one of her books with me because Rachel Carson is a constant companion. And I was going to go to the sea, and I was going to look at that intertidal zone and make a film about that. So I tried to walk out to the wash, and I kept going. It was like, well, where is it? You know, where's this ecotone, which I now know what that means. And I just kept walking. In the end, I had to give in to the landscape. And I thought, okay, right, something's going on here. And it was a failure to understand the landscape, because I'm from Liverpool and holidays is in the Lake District. I've never seen anything so flat in my life as this area around here. And it still kind of catches me, even on the train down yesterday. I was like, oh God, it's still flat, you know, it's a long, long way. And then I got into a meditation around it, and I just got into the feeling of walking. And I've talked to Rebecca a lot about that as well. So Rebecca is local to this area as well, Dr. Rebecca Hill. And she loves the fens as well. And I fell in love with this geography, the landscape. And Tim, I think one of your talks last year, going to Dersingham Bog and all around and everything, I sort of fell in love with the landscape. And I kind of trying to just show you some lovely romanticised, I suppose, slightly underdeveloped photographs of the landscape of one part of the salt marsh. And so the film became not the intertidal zone that Rachel Carson talks about, but about, well, what is it? What is this fenland? What's going on here? So I really fell in love with this landscape, and working with Rebecca, because Rebecca's got a really beautiful way of describing the fens. I made the film, and Rebecca's one of the voices on the film, if anyone's seen it, in the gallery when you were doing your residencies. So just some pictures of silt and underwater of the salt marshes. So the interconnectedness, which is rooted in queerness, kind of the ecological diversity of the salt marshes above and below the waterline show how that systems interact. And I loved, what's his name, who had the mobile phone footage of the water underground. That was just beautiful to me. So I spent quite a bit of time doing some GoPro underwater footage in various locations, and I really enjoyed that. So it's just trying to show, that boundary, I suppose, that fluid boundary. The two landscapes, the above and the below, kind of enable non-hierarchical relationships between species, and the underwater images evoke a sense of wonder and respect for the complexities of nature, and the systems are fluid as well. So I suppose in a way, like my work is around archive memory activism, and I really appreciate the work of CW and WC around sound as well. I think it's really important to be making work like that. I think it's a privilege actually to be part of seeing work like that. It's very rare to find sound art or audio art, and it's really difficult to make. I used to work in radio, so yeah, I just wanted to just say thanks to you as well for that. And that kind of made me think about like how I would represent the water within the film that I made for the residency in Salt Marsh, and I did use some hydrophone mics, and it's hard. It's really hard. Otherwise, it sounds very sort of clicky or whatever. So it's really difficult to get really good sound from the water. But and water doesn't make a sound in a sense unless something around it is moving. But yeah, so that was Salt Marsh. But then just going back to Rachel Carson, I don't want to talk about Rachel Carson actually, except to say that I really love Rachel Carson and I love her work. And I've been on quite a few conferences recently where Rachel Carson's work is talked about, but I think it's really important to talk beyond Rachel Carson as well. And anyone knows me knows I will talk about Rachel Carson for hours on end. But she is generally known to be the godmother of the environmentalist movement as we know it now. And her legacies around water and pesticides is well documented and well known as well. But there are other voices, and something you said today, Veronica, and I've heard you say it before about Indigenous voices. And I do believe that it's really important to get different voices in, and we do really need to, as an arts, as people within the arts, start to broaden what we understand to mean about Indigenous voices, because we had two examples there of Russell and the artist doing work in the Niger, but both doing really crucial work, but in very different ways. Both would be Indigenous or natural or local artists, if you like. So Indigenous and queer, there's kind of a lap over with that, and challenging kind of colonial norms, fostering inclusivity and caring about the environment. We know that there's a lot of Indigenous women, it's quite often women, it's quite often queer people doing a lot of the heavy lifting around the world. You've got divided communities where, lots of the women are doing works around massive dams that are being built, while their husbands, brothers, fathers are going out to work for the dams as well. So it's important to kind of understand and recognise that. I wanted to talk a little bit about Bell Hooks because she talks a little bit, actually she talks a lot about the environment and about the sort of legacy of the slave trade on American soil, and how farmers, black farmers, land was taken off them. and if you want to read a little bit more about different types of voices, I'd really recommend her book, Touching the Earth. And she says, when we love the earth, we are able to love ourselves more fully. And that's in a book called Touching the Earth. And it's a series of essays about nature. So, yeah, she talks about that. And she talks about interconnected care, because I think that's, for me, it's like one of the things that's come up today is how can we all care for each other as well, as artists and as activists, and who's doing the work. There's a couple of other names that I'd like to just introduce, which is Robin Wall-Kimmerer, Linda Hogan and Winona LeDuc, all doing really interesting work around, I suppose, the spiritual, the landscape, honourable harvesting, and different things like that. And I just wanted to finish actually talking about somebody called Jiang who's a writer. He's queer. I think he's queer. It's really strange to sort of out somebody in a way. But he's a queer ecologist working in the Bay of Bengal, and he's doing work that's very similar to Rachel Carson. And in fact, I would say that he's possibly one of the inheritors of Rachel Carson's work. And I was going to sort of talk about Rachel Carson's erasure of her private life. So Rachel Carson had a 10-year affair with Dorothy Freeman. So they were in love with each other. They were lesbians. She was married. And this is the bit of Rachel Carson's life that's not talked about. It's not known about. And when I was looking into Rachel Carson 3 or 4 years ago, I was thinking, where's the husband? Where's the man? Where's the fella? There wasn't one, so I kept searching. And I found that she had a 10-year relationship with Dorothy Freeman. So I think that queer erasure is where, when you're talking about queer ecology, you know, if you're erased, your experience is erased as a human being, it places you in the margins, it places you in outside of a heteronormative society. So you can only look at the situation from a queer view, from a queer point of view. So I wanted to connect, because I do love Rachel Carson, but I wanted to introduce Jiang as somebody who's working in the field now, in salt marshes in the Bay of Bengal. And I actually want to go and work with him. So my practice has gone from making short films about sycamore trees, salt marshes in the Fens in Norfolk, to actually, well, what am I going to do? Go out and do some work, you know. What do I want to do? Something more local or something international. So I'd recommend his book. It's called Intertidal. And yeah, it's really good. That's it. Thanks. Thank you.
Hello. Liz, look, I'm last, again. So I did the residency here this year with Liz and everybody, and we presented 3 times. Every time I've been last. What is it, Veronica? What? You're yeah, top of the bill. Thank you. Top of the bill. Well, thanks for the introduction, and thank you, Helen, for your presentation as well. And I'm going to also kind of speak about queer ecology at the back end of this. So give you a kind of, well, it's going to be more Jack Halberstam quotes. Different ones, though, so you haven't seen them ones. And yeah, we'll get there. And yeah, so I've titled the presentation Glitch Ecology because I am there referencing queer ecology, and I'm going to make the connection between glitch and queerness in a second. The work that's in the gallery, which that's an image of, is called Source Material. It was an image of. That lovely little screen broke, and so it's on another screen now, but hey, there you go. Because it was like a 40-year-old CRT monitor. Yeah, so because the work is a video work made with kind of old video cameras. Yes, so why don't I talk about that rather than not? Yeah, well, I mean, to introduce myself, I live in Leeds. I came here for the residency in Leeds. I am an artist working mainly with sound, but now also dabbling with video, as I did in this residency. And I'm also an academic at Leeds Beckett University. I teach music technology and sound technology. So yeah, my background is coming to all of this through sound, through music, and more precisely electronic music, dance music. And I think that if you know the trajectory all of that, then my use of glitch, which is what is used in this film, kind of makes sense, because glitch music and so on is a thing. Yeah, so the work is called Source Material. It's a 6.5-minute glitch film concerning 3 chalk rivers that run through King's Lynn or near to King's Lynn, those rivers being the Nar, the Gayward and the Babingley, which we already heard Russell, who's now left, I guess, speak about, particularly the Gayward. And it was him, actually, that was of great inspiration to this work, the time that we spent with him. And yeah, so the film contains footage that I captured close to the source of the rivers, where they are at their healthiest and less affected by pollution from farming or water treatment, and less subject to flood management interventions such as dredging. Again, Russell showed us the effects of all of that. And yeah, as I say, it was a response to the day within the residency research week where we walked that river with Russell, and he showed us the kind of the barren, sickly nature of the Gayward closer into King's Lynn. And subsequently, I then went out to the areas before all of the pollutants and so on are there, and recorded in those towards the source in those locations. I'm going to show you 90 seconds of that 6.5-minute film, and then, yeah, I'll obviously speak a bit more. So that's one of 2 versions of the work. That the second version has music in it as well, and that music is samples from old 1960s and 70s library music, or like nature vinyl that's got like bird song and stuff on it. I made the 2 versions simply because I'm quite indecisive and I can't decide like exactly what I wanted the sound to do. And yeah, so this version is wholly field recordings that I have manipulated, that I have glitched as I have glitched the image. And those field recordings are all made at the locations that I visited. If you want to know what those locations are, where are my sources? The blue rings show you those. So for the Nar, I went here, which is not quite at the source because that's over here somewhere. I went between Castleacre and Westacre. For the Gayward, I went to the source where Russell told me to go, which is by West something. Somebody want to help me out? Well Hall. That's right. So a footpath by Well Hall. And then the Babingley, I went to 3 locations, some of which with Liz. At the back, well, we all went to the one at Abbey Farm together in the research week, which is the one on furthest left there, and then I went to 2 further sites that you can see there as well. And so all the video footage you see inside of the film is recorded in those locations, as is the sound. This is me looking super sexy in those wellies. and stood in the NAR recording sound. So yeah, the image I recorded on an old 1990s handycam, like video handycam, and I focused on looking into the river, onto the flow, and onto the vegetation beneath or breaking through that flow. And for sound, I recorded both ambiences at the locations, so things such as birdsong, like the pigeons we heard, and then underwater audio using hydrophones. We've already heard people mention those. You can see me with the hydrophone there. That's the cable that's going into the water, and I'm stood listening to that flow. And we heard some of that inside of the 90 seconds that I played to you. And then back in the flat I stayed in, I was going to say studio, but it wasn't. It was a kitchen. I then glitched the image using analog techniques, essentially the electrical signal that comes out your handycam. I messed with that, and then as it arrives back onto a monitor or into a computer, it's now all messed up. The ways it gets messed up, as we can see here, it will exaggerate colors, it will bleed colors into one another, it will distort the image, and it will make the image stutter as well. And then I did equivalent with the audio too, and that's all the clicks and everything that you hear within the sound. And yeah, so it is a glitch work by way of that. And just to get down into why I'm using glitch and what I think it's achieving within this work. So my rationale for using glitch. Well, firstly, it's because I like the aesthetic of it. I like how it kind of brings forwards the vibrancy of the thing that you've recorded. But then also, there's two thinkers that I'm just going to take you through, one of which we've heard about, Jack Halberstam, and then here Mark Fisher, whose ideas I'm drawing on kind of in the concept of using glitch. So starting with Mark Fisher, his concept of hauntology, which this is a definition of, chimes with one approach that I've taken to the work. The film's glitchy image and sound, along with its use of 1960s and 70s library music and nature recordings, give it the feeling of a lost relic, of a lost documentary, either from the past, when the whole length of these rivers, upstream and downstream, was healthy and full of life, or from the future, perhaps 50 years from now, when all three rivers have fallen into ruin. So that's one reading of it. But of greatest influence to me has been Jack Halberstam for this work and for its use of glitch. Jack Halberstam has a book called Queer Art Failure, and from that I understand glitch as a form of failure, and through Halberstam then I can connect glitch and failure and queerness together, and therefore I can connect all of that with my own identity. It's a queer style, it's then my style. And Halberstam presents failure as something very beautiful and very brilliant, with the capacity of bettering our world, and all of that resonated with me, and I find that all very empowering. That I am very beautiful and I am very brilliant, with all of my flaws, yes, and we all are, of course. Yes, and so in the description of that accompanies the work in the gallery, I ended with a small provocation, suggesting how failure might benefit the Babingley, the Nar, and the Gaywood. I wrote the following. Following Halberstam, imperfection, malfunction, obsolescence, and fragmentation are modes of resistance to normative logics of mastery, proficiency, progress, and linearity, gesturing towards more sympathetic, less domineering ways of being. He proposes undoing, which is written in there, losing, forgetting, or making, undoing. He proposes undoing as another form of resistance. Applied to rivers, this might mean refusing dredging or working to restore downstream stretches to the abundance found upstream. I actually came, so there's I'm reading undoing in two ways there. That undoing, returning something back to what it was, as well as undoing, not doing, refusing to do something. And that second one actually came to me from Russell. When we went round with Russell, I asked him if he had custody of those rivers, if somebody gave him custody of the rivers of the Gaywood, what would he do? And he said, nothing. I'd let all of the life grow back and then go from there. And so, yes, he is, without knowing, a queer ecologist. And he'll never know now, unless one of you tell him. And then, yeah, to end, I just kind of turning to Jack Halberstam and his thought more in, around a queer ecology. So this is from a second text from him. So the Queer Art Failures, like 2011, and this one's 2020. And they're very much connected. There's lots of ideas that they share, and there's lots of ideas that I think resonate with my work. And this one, yeah, called Wild Things, I thought I'd mention to kind of look at queer ecology. I won't read this quote, instead I'll just say about queer ecology. So queer ecology, of which Halberstam is one voice, involves queering ecology. So challenging the normative assumptions, binaries and power structures that have shaped ecology, ecological thinking, past and present, especially the human-nature divide that positions humans as separate from and superior to non-human life. Instead, queer ecology embraces fluidity, interdependence and entanglement with the more than human world. So like Halberstam, I and my work embrace and advocate for failure and wilderness, and I believe in both as forms of forces for change, including environmental change. And that's where I shall leave it. Thank you.
Lovely. So is there any questions? Have we got a mic? Yeah.
This is a question for Matt. Okay. Due to some form of glitch, I've seen your film a couple of times in the gallery in black and white, and I've really enjoyed it. And other people who have come with me have also really enjoyed it, without the colour. But I like them both. Do you have strong feelings? Well, I'm just raising that as a question for you as to what it feels like to see it in black and white.
Yeah, I made Veronica put it back to colour. I mean, yeah, I guess, no, it's interesting. And I was speaking to somebody else about that as well, and they were telling me that it looked like Solaris, and I was very happy to hear that. One of the greatest films of all time. Yeah, so, no, it's interesting. Actually, Michelle saw it before the opening, that the monitor went black and white when she went to see it before everybody else saw it, and she freaked me out because obviously at that time I was like, I do not want this to break. And I didn't quite believe it that it went black and white. But yeah, so no, a big part of it, I think, is the way that glitch messes with the colours and the otherworldliness that brings, that I found really appealing in it, and for me is a strong part of the work. Can I throw a question back at you then? What did you get from it in black and white then?
I think I really enjoyed seeing things in black and white,
Right.
and comparing
Right.
with the colour.
Mm-hmm.
Because, it just has a different atmosphere to it.
Mm-hmm. I think the same goes for if there's now so many versions of this that you can have the colour version, you can have the black and white version, there's the version that's just ambient sound, there's a version that's got music, because I think those two versions as well are quite different, and they kind of signal something different each. I think there's a different listening attention when it's without the music. I think when the music is there, it leans more into that idea of the lost documentary, because it's got those kind of 60s, 70s references within it. Yeah.
I've got one question I'd love to ask. From reading that book, it made me think about my own glitches and failures. And I personally failed at education, but that was turned around because I was able then to do both of my degrees while I was working. I'm funded by the public sector. It means I can never, ever, ever leave, but it means I'm committed now to giving back, all that knowledge back to the community. So can either of you describe any failures that have actually had a different result than you expected?
Well, I guess just simply, I spent a large portion of my life thinking there was something wrong with me. I mean, that is the truth, you know, across my teenage years in the 90s. And I think why I find something like The Queer Art of Failure in any of Jack Halberstam's writing very empowering is that it makes me see those things that I felt were wrong about me as like very precious, very valuable things.
Mm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You'll actually see those things in colour.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, because I know that book as well, it's a really funny book, and I think identifying as queer from the LGBT community, you know, you're kind of on the back foot all the time, and there's a bit of a tax, and if you're neurodivergent like me as well, there's a double tax. So today, waiting to be the last speaker has been really physically demanding. I'm going to be really tired tomorrow, but I'm looking forward to that workshop. But yeah, I really resonate with that, like the queer art of failure. And I think this is, you know, when we put species above other species, like the dandelion above a certain type of flower, or the oak tree above the sycamore, and we do this to humans all the time. Just think of all the wars that are happening now. And it's playing out in front of our very eyes, you know, the sort of ecocide and the genocide and the wars that are happening. So the queer art of failure, it's kind of it's not a funny book, but it's a bit like gay shame. It kind of gets you to own your own stuff, you know. And I've so many failures in my life that it's, I think being I suppose being gay or being queer or LGBT is failure, but also the failure of the Fluid Earth conference, in a way, is, to me, there's a trans reading to that as well. So the word fluid and gender fluidity and, you know, non-binary, that, you know, that kind of like, there's a reading there for me, which some people may pick up, others may not, or whatever. And that's in the systems and the ecosystems as well, and all the species and plants that we all love as well.
Thank you.
Sorry, it got to the fact that you came last. I can't tell you how many times I've reorganised that programme. And it was 2 days at one stage, and then people... Anyway, it's never mind, it's all complicated. I suppose I first came to the notion of queer as a medievalist in a very different way as an academic thing, not to do with gender especially, and that's included, but to do with kind of the world turned upside down and a subversion and an inversion of normative values and orthodoxies. And I wonder to what extent that reading might be part of your thinking as queer ecologists that could lend you, I mean, it could either be seen as there's a subversive element, which you might celebrate, but also it's not really, I mean, I find the whole notion of failure being emphasised kind of unfortunate, because one reads that as not succeeding in some way, whereas the other reading of queer as subversive, playful, inverting normative values is, well, playful. So I'll leave that.
Okay, well, thanks. I don't think queer is playful necessarily. I think being queer right now, especially as part of the trans community and gender non-conforming community, is really dangerous in this country. There's an example I could give you recently of just, you know, an organisation banning trans women in a cycling. You know, 2 weeks ago I taught women how to cycle when I wasn't doing this, and it's a really big part of my life. And I mean all women, you know, all people, transgender women and other women, you know, cis women. And then because of a ruling, recent ruling, Cycling UK now have changed their Cycling 100 Women Awards to disbar trans women. So now the group that I'm in has become a protest group. And I'm afraid this kind of took the back seat, because I don't want to be in a protest group again this year. for the 10th year in a row, and that's the tax, I mean. So I think that the notion of being queer or from the LGBT community is playful and easy, and there is a big fun aspect to that, but there is also a massive cost to the body. So by the time you get to my age, you start feeling it in your bones and you get really tired of it. And I think that's the tax that I'm talking about, you know. And people who identify as heterosexual from heteronormativity societies, they don't have that and they don't know it, you know. I'm white as well, so I don't have, you know, if people are black, I don't have that knowledge as well. But I would say as well about the word queer, I do know it's a slur and it's a very white colonialist word as well, and it is deeply problematic, but it's also taken from the queer community to celebrate as well. I don't know if you've got anything to add, Matt.
I mean, I guess I'd be echoing a lot of what you're saying. I guess about the failure thing, I can see that's a hard sell, perhaps, of being like, why don't we all just fail? But I think for Halberstam, that word encapsulates a lot of things, and it can go to lots of different places. There's a chapter on like failure of memory and things like that inside of there, which is funnily enough looking at Finding Nemo, which is a low art that's in that book. I mean, that's exactly what, looking at a lot of Pixar movies in that book. So yeah, I just think it's a very good, for everything that Jack Halberstam wants to discuss there, I think that title, that word is a very good encapsulating word. But I understand that, yeah, as I say, it's a hard sell. But then, you know, I guess the common phrase of like learning from your mistakes and the importance of learning from your mistakes, I think that's we see that as very positive, and of course mistake and failure are very close. And then when you're saying about the kind of activist angle of kind of going against kind of normative ideals and assumptions and so on, I mean, it is trying to do that. Both texts, Wild Things, Queer Art Failure, both texts are trying to do that. That's very much their line of like, what are we failing are these things that a heteronormative society, a colonial society built over the last 100 years, we are failing at those things that are told to us should be the successes. But it's kind of then trying to say, well, are they really successes? Are they really the right things to be doing? That, you know, maybe there are, actually, if we just kind of stop for a second and go, well, and subvert that and say, well, no, what about this instead? Then actually they are we might reassess then what is success, and some of those things that Halberstam is there calling failure, we ultimately could see as being the success. So because they are failing those heteronormative ways of being. So it's like I've failed to get married. I've failed to have kids, but you know, ultimately I shouldn't feel like that's a failure, and that's what it's kind of picking up on.
Hello, I'm listening intently to what you're saying, and I've just a phrase which I've learnt many years ago, or just popped up many years ago. It says, "Our growth consists in being defeated by challenges ever grandlier great." So I think that turns failure into a positive value, because it's all about growth, and I suppose that's a kind of humanist perspective to some extent, but I think that it's common to all humanity, the wish to grow and I don't know, assert oneself, you know, the will to life, as it were, and I think that that's coming through in your talks very clearly.
Yeah, thanks. Grow, but not necessarily progress, because again, that's yes, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, I suppose for me it was just following on this a little bit. Probably nobody in this room would take that value set and feel that we hadn't failed at it to a degree, because we probably have no intention to aspire to any of that, because it's all of the environmental impacts, all of the things about the societal values that we probably don't hold. Well, certainly I don't hold true, but I really find that very interesting, to look at our humanity and our fragility in terms of you hold yourself against those values, have you failed? And then what is it to carry that around with you? And then at the point that you go, yes, I did fail in that set, but now I'm great with that because I didn't want to be that anyway. Does that make sense? And I think it's really interesting hearing you talk about that. And actually, if we all thought, not just learning from our mistakes, because that's almost like I made a mistake and I've learned from it, but I acknowledge it was a mistake. You're kind of almost talking about measuring yourself against a value system that is wrong, a set of values that, you know, are not inclusive, are not. So it's not. I don't know how I'm trying to put this, but it's not a. You wouldn't look at it and go, it's a personal failing. Now, perhaps, you know.
Yeah, exactly. I look at it, as what has been the kind of dominant line of values,
Yes,
and
exactly.
saying that line of values, we would now. This is then challenge that and saying that.
But it's
itself is now wrong.
marginalising, and it can make us feel at different times in our life incredibly
Yeah,
alone when other people are pushing that value system, potentially.
And again, I think this is all very personal to me, that I think I tried for a long time, even after I was out, to kind of be a straight male. I teach music technology, and like 90% of the people I work with are male, straight males. 90% of the students are male, and I think I spent a good number of years kind of trying to just be heteronormative, I guess, and do all of those things. And I think now I'm waking up to, and I said to Liz earlier, that my artwork has only recently kind of started. I've tried to bring my identity into it. I never wanted to bring my identity into it before, and now I feel like I really have to. And in all honesty, it's because of this kind of the pain of not doing it. Anyway.
I just was really struck by you talking, Helen, about going out to the marsh there, and the sense of how nature, how all other living things, apart from humans and our consciousness. I mean, maybe some apes are like. It's like we impose an idea on something about how it should be. So all of these conversations about failure and success and who we are and definitions is about being human, because other species and beings just don't do it. And I really like the idea about. I made a map of. I'm making a map of the whole Norfolk textile, but that edge I didn't really know either, and I had to sort of complete it, but I've left it as kind of blank, and. I just love the idea that your idea of the marginal is like nature's not gonna adjust or change for you. It's like that relentlessness that you talked about, like just discovering it's completely something else, and it's wonderful, isn't it, that it's not going to adjust to our preconceptions. So there seems to be something very powerful in that. And I wondered, I was trying to tie it up with the idea of you about you using like CRTs and old-fashioned technology, which was what I was trained in, and I've sort of given up doing video stuff because digital sort of left me behind a bit. I need to catch up, but I wondered, there's some way that like older technology won't do the things we expect things to do, and I'm just sort of playing with those ideas in my head. It's sort of excited me thinking about nature won't adjust to us, it just does it responds to what we do, and sort of clunky things, we have to live with what they do and then make the best of it. So I don't know if you can both say something to that. Does that make any sense at all?
Yeah, I feel like I just want to talk about the salt marshes all the time, actually, and my relationship to them, because I really did come to King's Lynn not knowing what I was getting into here at all. It was my first residency, because I've shown in cinemas, I've shown films on TV and stuff, but I've never shown work in a gallery. space, and I didn't know the landscape as well, and I just loved that. And if I could go back 40 years, I'd probably do what Tim's doing, to be honest. So I fell in love with the landscape and Hunstanton and that whole coast as well. And every time I come back here, and I keep coming back here as well now, and I've got friends, and I want to say thanks to Micah as well, because Micah's really supported a lot of artists, and myself, you know, through the last couple of years, really, as well. So Veronica and Micah, fantastic work that they're doing here. But the, yeah. But I think this landscape, I didn't really know it. And then when I started researching it, so I've been researching it for the last couple of years, it's the same in Iraq. It's the same in Florida. It's the same landscape in the Bay of Bengal. It's the same story. So the story is repeatable over and over because it's the same landscape, obviously. You know, and I'm not like I'm not scientific, so I'm learning this from a humanist, from a human point of view, if you like. But I don't know what it was about that, you know, that initial joke of like, well, where is it? You know, because I'm looking on the map in Liverpool, going, oh, I'll just walk there. It'll take me an hour, and I'll be there, and I'll set up, and I'll do the. I was like, God, and you can't get to it, and I love that. I actually, you know, that's the point of it. Up in Ongar Hill, I think, kind of got a little bit closer to it. But I don't know what I'm trying to get close to either. Do you know what I mean? It's like, what am I trying to get to? So it's quite a fascinating, for me, landscape that I didn't think, it's unexpected, if you like. So, and it was a bit of a falling in love with it. I'd love to dive into that mud, like with no clothes on, you know, and kind of play around that. But I don't think that's a good idea, particularly. But yeah, like really get physical with that as well.
The River Severn has got fantastic mud.
Oh, thanks. Right,
Really
I'll write
is.
that down. Yeah.
Just west, you go west of Stroud, where there's a big loop in the river.
And you can walk in.
Well, yeah, you might not get out, but it is.
Okay.
it is so fine, the mud,
Yeah.
that you won't get it out of your skin for a while. But it is incredibly slippery.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Thanks for the tip off.
And the trick is to stay flat, apparently, then you don't sink.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah.
that's
right.
the trick.
You mentioned you used to work with CRT. Have you got any? Might keep breaking. I was going to say though that about that I was because it links, and why I look back at that quote, because that quote when we get to the text on the wild things talks a lot about chaos and how things are uncontrollable and uncategorizable. We can't kind of stick them into boxes, and that you kind of have to learn to deal with that. And that is very much the process of glitching these images. That, you know, I sit with this unit, which is a series of knobs, and as I turn one, it can make the image totally cut and screw out, and the screen goes black. And I have to find the bits in between that just work before it all completely falls apart. And so, yeah, I'm kind of having to weave my way through that chaos. But I do remember, like, I had a couple of ideas of what I wanted to base my work on, and one of them was on the tide, and how, because we went to the port and hearing about, like, how that they only do certain things on certain days within the month because of the tide levels and so on. And then how there we're hearing, and then there was other things within our residency's time which were kind of saying a similar thing of, like, learning to live with that tide and the fluctuations in that tide, rather than control it, to learn how to, kind of do what we need to do alongside it and allow it to continue to do that. And I think that that's a really strong idea of where I feel like we need to go with many aspects of kind of our environments and lives. So beyond my little box into the real world.
Is this on? Thank you very much. I'm standing up so I can see Helen too. Sorry, I'm croaky. Thank you very much. I think reflecting on what you've been saying, all of us here at the end, we could have easily started today with this session, because I think GroundWork is a queer space. it's a space where we celebrate and fight for diversity and equality and inclusion of all types, environmentally, socially, in terms of human beings. I think really GroundWork is a gallery that is non-conforming very successfully. And I think I used to live in London, and the private galleries in London I just would not walk into. I'm sorry, but they're just so oppressive from the out, you know, when you look in. And I think GroundWork is the exact opposite of that, and I think that is to be celebrated. And I also think that what you've raised here is something I'm working on at the moment. A Mexican feminist has written a book for the UN about the history of the far right's never-ending and constantly changing campaigns against gender, diversity, LGBT, identities and rights, queer people, feminists, gender equality, women's rights, which is, you know, spreading far and wide and is very much connected, and they're the same actors who are undoing all the commitments to reducing global warming. And, you know, in the world of society and the environment, we have people and movements who are out to finish us off, basically. And I think it's very important when we think about Norfolk, Suffolk examples of environmental damage, and we link that to global movements and global change, how much the feminist and queer world is under attack, just as the environmental movements are, and all our efforts to achieve limits to global warming and a real respect for nature and diversity of nature. So in a way, what you've done, bringing the session to the end, is we're framing the big picture, linking the global to the local, and we're actually recognizing what a special space GroundWork Gallery is, and in a way King's Lynn too. It's under the radar, quite so far ungentrified, and it's not conforming to the norm in that sense either of what is progress in British towns and cities. So I think it's just very special that you've both presented what you have. Thank you.
Thank you. You've done a brilliant wrap-up there, Karen. And thank you very much for what you said. And thank Fabia for chairing the session. Thank you two for speaking. And thank everybody for speaking so eloquently today and thinking so hard and making us think so hard. Right at the beginning of the day, Rebecca, you mentioned experiential learning, that you might not have quite got the gist, but actually it becomes something else in experiential learning. Oh, there's a boat just going past, all lit up. It's quite exciting on this river to see river traffic, because it's not very often. Anyway, because the tide has to be in and high, as we've just learnt from you. Anyway, thank you all, and I'm not going to witter on anymore. I think we should go to the gallery and have a drink, and we'll see Jeremy's books. We'll see all the wonderful things on show. Oh, and Bridget's workshop tomorrow. Hooray. Yes, Bridget's workshop tomorrow. It will be at Micah's, Bridge Street, Baum Studio, which is kind of over in that direction, 5 minutes walk away. 33. But if you walked into 32, it would also be Micah's. Yeah. So let's go for a drink. And yes. Okay. Did everyone get that a bit earlier? What, 1:45, 10:30? Yeah, of Good point. Very good. Mary, could you possibly run ahead and unlock and make sure everything's turned on? Because I'll
Thank
clear
you,
up.
Veronica.
Thank you. Thank all of you. Thank you. And thank Henry. Yay.